Help sick and injured children by donating to my Extra Life campaign. Link in the description and pinned comment. All proceeds go to Children's Wisconsin. If we reach $1,000, I'll make my Discord server public. Well, you know what they say. Good things come to those who wait. And wait. And wait! To me, remakes are a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, some of them are completely unnecessary and in some cases turn out to be even worse than the games they're remaking. On the other hand, some remakes provide a fresh take on classic titles, and in fact, some titles have only gotten widespread releases thanks to modern hardware. Which brings us to today's topic, a remake I'm very thankful for, Live Alive. Originally released in 1994 for the Super Famicom, its original run did very poorly in sales, which led to it not getting released in other territories. But it became a cult classic thanks in part to the fan translation. Fast forward to 2022, and Square Enix's HD 2D style gives them the perfect opportunity to finally give this game the official wider release it's needed. And let me tell you, it has been more than worth the wait. So today I'm going to give you a rundown on what makes this game so special. The stories. Live Alive is a very unique take on RPGs in that it's essentially an anthology, consisting of several stories across multiple eras, and while the chapters all share the same combat system, each tale has its own characters, stories, and features. And I'm going to rank these chapters from the bottom of the heap to my absolute favorite. And in doing so, I will be spoiling the whole game, including the final acts. So if you want to go in blind and get the experience of playing this game with fresh eyes, you can leave now. For the rest of you, strap yourself in, because this journey is about to come alive. It's game time! Let's talk about Undertale for a brief moment. One of the things that made Undertale so special, aside from its very memorable cast of characters, was the emphasis on choice. You could either kill everything in sight, you could run from or even befriend the monsters and complete a pacifist run, or somewhere down the middle. It was a really cool take on the traditional formula. This was probably inspired by the Twilight of Edo Japan chapter. There's just one teensy-weensy but ever so crucial little tiny detail. This chapter sucks! Yeah, there's no stealthing around the issue here. Twilight of Edo Japan is the only chapter in the game that I think is genuinely bad. Okay, so here's the setup. The warlord Ode Io has captured a very important prisoner, and so the ninja Oboromaru is tasked with infiltrating the castle and rescuing him. You even get a map and an instant stealth technique you can use to avoid enemies on the map. Sounds good, right? Well, here's the thing. When you kill a standard enemy, Oboromaru makes a note of it, so you can do a pacifist run with only killing enemies that are necessary, which will earn you a powerful weapon for the finale, go full slaughter and kill everything to increase your level easily, or somewhere in between. At least, that's how it's supposed to go. In reality, the killing route is essentially pointless because there are certain demonic enemies you can kill without raising your kill count and gain experience anyway, including the 2 super bosses. Second, and more importantly, both the genocide and pacifist routes suffer from what TV Tropes calls God dang it. There are so many things you have to do in order to get the desired ending that are easily missed without a guide. This is especially true in the pacifist route, because there are several mistakes you can make throughout the chapter that can permanently lock you out of the pacifist route. One of the worst is finding the Mimic and preventing him from breaking, because near the end, the Mimic malfunctions, killing 3 human guards, and that doesn't count toward your kill count. How was I supposed to know that? Was he supposed to know that?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
If I can say some positive things about this chapter, it's that both the music and scenery are really good, the fight with Ode Io is also pretty good, and Oboromaru himself learns some really awesome physical and special techniques. Sadly, that doesn't make up for awkward level design and the ambiguity of what you can and can't kill if you want to complete the pacifist run. There's technically 3 routes, but basically, realistically, without a guide, there's only one. At least Undertale did the idea right. Now here's where things get a little dicey. The near future chapter is a pretty divisive one. Some see it as one of the best chapters in the game and a monument to the glory of anime, while others see it as one of the worst levels ever and proof that Dracula was completely justified. As for me, well, I'm somewhat in the middle on this one. This is the story of Akira, a delinquent orphan with psychic powers which he mainly uses to read minds, which is the main gimmick of the chapter. And yeah, there is some Earthbound level shenanigans to be had here, but the big payoff is promised in an anime-style opening performed in the remake by Hironobu Kageyama. For those who don't know, he's performed several Dragon Ball Z songs and is a member of the anime rock group Jam Project. And yeah, we do get that payoff, and it is awesome! However, getting there can be a little bit of a slog at times. Part of that comes from an occasional lack of clarity to advance the story. At a few points, it's not always clear what you have to do, what minds you have to read, or whatever. And in the original, Akira was said to be a bit weak sauce, though I didn't find that to be an issue in the remake. Granted, I did grind quite a bit to unlock Akira's ultimate move. Also, the item crafting system is a bit of a crapshoot, meaning sometimes it can take several tries for a combination to succeed, and not always getting the item you're shooting for. And while it does make sense, using mechanical parts to upgrade the turtle robot is a bit awkward. Speaking of which, the story as a whole is kinda bonkers. When your scientist buddy liquefies the essence of a dying turtle and uses it to power a robot, you know things will eventually go completely off the rails. And it goes deeper into full-on body horror when you see why those gangsters you've been fighting have been kidnapping all those people. It's all because of the idea of these three: Priest Unryu, General Yamazaki, and a barely alive scientist named Living Still. Yeah, no subtlety detected here. They would then proceed to build a singularity, the worst idea anyone could possibly have. And the only way to stop said idea is through that big payoff I mentioned earlier. Getting to control the Steel Titan is an anime fan's power fantasy. Stomping through the city, clobbering your way through the evil trio's armed forces as you make your way to the temple in the north for the climactic showdown with the statue of Odeo. It is as satisfying as hell. Right up until the ending, which honestly left me scratching my head from the ambiguity. So yeah, I have slightly more positive things to say about this chapter than negative, but the busy work you need to do for that payoff drags it down a bit. But hey, giant robot! Chicks dig giant robots! Well, I reckon it's high time we start rounding up the chapters I can talk right more pretty about, am I right, y'all? Yeah, now we're getting to the really good stuff. Starting with the Wild West chapter, where everything is sand as far as the eye can see, justice is doled out with 6 shooters at 10 paces, and the men in town have no dick. This is the tale of the Sundown Kid, a wandering outlaw with a price on his head, Mad Dog, a bounty hunter who's been hot on Sundown's tail for as long as The Price is Right has been on the air, and the rundown Dust Bowl where our protagonist finds himself. The town of Success has been left a shadow of its former glory from the gold rush, and now it's being hogtied by a herd of roughnecks calling themselves the Crazy Bunch, and the only ones with the guts to actually say anything are the barmaid and the sheriff's kid. In enters Sundown, who gives one of them the heave-ho. The town starts getting ideas, and then Mad Dog shows up and challenges our hero, only for their showdown to get interrupted by more of the creeps. Naturally, the rest of the Crazy Bunch isn't about to take this sitting down, so at the urging of Annie, who naturally has more of a spine than the dudes in town put together, Mad Dog hatches up a plan to give the old cowpokes what for. And that involves going around town looking for stuff like carrots, coal tar, Molotovs, rope, and even horse shit. And then letting the town folks set it all up to catch the bad guys. You'll also find equipment and utilities to take into the big fight with Odeo and his gang. Here's the catch. You've got 8 rings of the bell to do all your work and get everything set up before sunrise. That works out to about 15 minutes, so you can't afford to waste time. Though it's extremely satisfying to see the rustlers roll into town only to get manhandled one by all your treacherous traps until only the big man is left. Though this does lead to a bit of a nitpick. Once you know where everything is, it isn't that hard to optimize your run for replays. Or if you're a daredevil, you can just take on the entire gang yourself. It's harder than catching a greased pig, but doable if you have the proper strategy. Not that Odeo himself is any pushover even on his own. In fact, this relies on positioning arguably more than any other of the chapter bosses. You do not want to be in the range of that Gatling gun, or he will turn you into Swiss cheese. Overall, this chapter is where we start getting good, with great presentation, especially the music, and Sundown's gameplay as a long-range fighter is on full display for the few battles that there are. If there were more chances to show off Sundown's abilities, this may have ranked higher, but it's still a rootin' tootin' good time. For a chapter about cowboys, this definitely makes my day. Not to mention, there's some pretty ballsy dialogue in this chapter.
But that you can't stomach it, unless it's fresh from your mother's tits.
Your mother's, maybe.
Oh, shit.
One more thing.
If you've ever wanted to play through a classic kung fu flick, well, now's your chance to do just that. The Imperial China chapter takes a pretty interesting approach to its storytelling, which, all things considered, meshes with the gameplay very well. The main character of our story is an elderly kung fu master, the Shifu of the Earthen Heart style. Unfortunately, time has been about as kind to him as Twitter is to the average person's sanity. Looks like we need to find a student down in the village and in the forest below. Behind door number 1, Hong Haka, a big hungry dude who's a serious tank. Behind door number 2, Lei Kugo, a speedy little lady who will end up learning some dope-ass AoE abilities as she gets stronger. Behind door number 3, Yuin Zhou, a young man who's been forced to steal for a gang of thieves and decides he's had enough. He starts off kinda weak sauce but has the best growth rates of the three. Choose wisely and quickly. You'll likely find out soon that the best strategy here is to pick one of them right away and train them exclusively. Welcome to the Shifu's School of Hard Knocks. There's no tuition, the course lasts only 3 days, 1 for defense, 1 for speed, and 1 for power, and the learning is about as hands-on as it gets. Your student is guaranteed to rise to the head of the class, once their own head stops pounding, that is. Too bad those thugs from earlier wanted to interrupt the final exam on behalf of OD1 Lee from the Indomitable Fist School, and crash the goddamn graduation and kill 2 of your class! Now do you see what I mean? One of the few times where favoritism actually pays off. And now, payback. But thankfully, your star pupil isn't far behind, having been taught the Shifu's secret technique. And time to show off the results of your interactive training montage as the 2 of you storm the rival school and beat down wave after wave of enemies. So this is similar to the Wild West chapter in that optimizing your strategy isn't that hard. However, I'd argue that it works better in this chapter since you actually get to do more of the good stuff yourself as opposed to only having 4 mandatory battles throughout the entire chapter. The payoff is a whole enemy rush instead of simply a cutscene. In the end, you reach the chamber of OD1 Lee and his 12 strongest students. Oh wait, he actually has 2 more hidden away. But the Shifu takes those 2 on by himself, leaving your graduate to face OD1 Lee alone. And it is as satisfying as hell to unleash Heavenly Peak's descent and lay a well-deserved smackdown on the leader of the Indomitable Fist, tempered only by the bittersweet ending. This chapter delivered a great payoff for your efforts, enhanced further by the great music and visuals, making for a crash course in kick-ass you won't soon forget, no matter which of the 3 disciples you end up choosing. And for the record, I chose Lei as my successor for the badass multi-target moves she has. Summoning celestial dragons to ravage the whole field? Yes, please. I was originally going to use the I know Kung Fu line for the Imperial China chapter, but then I decided this one would be a better fit for it. The chapters so far have given the impression that they took inspiration from various types of movies. The present-day chapter is a bit different in that regard. Our protagonist this time is Masaru Takahara, who I've talked about fairly recently, but for those of you who didn't see my countdown 2 months ago, I'll review. This guy's a born fighter, and he has a dream of making his way to the top of the ranks, and he's looking to do it the right way. No steroids, no cybernetic enhancements, just his strength, his intense training, and his photographic reflexes. And now he's out to find the world's strongest competitors and claim their skills for himself. Basically, this is one big homage to fighting games. There's even a character select screen where you decide which of the 6 masters you wish to fight, and you can take them on in any order. Fittingly enough, Live Alive is the first title from Square that composer Yoko Shimomura worked on, with Street Fighter II being one of the titles she wrote for previously. This chapter is just a straight-up gauntlet. All fights, no fluff. Your opponents are masters of various martial arts. Namkiat, a speedy and cocky Muay Thai prodigy. The Great Aja, a fierce and brutal luchador. Tula Han, a former Russian soldier who excels in CQC. Seishi Moribe, an elderly but deadly master of Koppo. Max Morgan, a wrestler who loves to put on a show. and Jackie Iakea, a former sumo wrestler turned MMA fighter. Each of these opponents have at least 2 moves that Masaru can learn, and in this aspect, the fights become a bit of a puzzle, which I appreciate. In order to learn your opponent's moves, you need to bait them into using them. Sometimes it's your positioning that matters, sometimes the moves are a counter, etc. The chapter also has some similarities to a Mega Man game in that each of the fighters is vulnerable to a certain type of move which you can learn from one of the others. Thankfully, if you don't learn all the moves the first time, you can challenge them again for a run back. That is, until you beat the last guy, at which point the masters you beat are ominously and unceremoniously killed off by this guy. I mean, come on, he straight up murdered them! Really, dude? We're just fighting for sport here! I mean, Aja was a heel, but he wasn't a cold-blooded killer! And what is this guy's name? Odie. Odie O'Bright. I mean, I get the pattern, but the name Odie doesn't exactly sound threatening. I do think that this is one of the stronger chapters of the initial 7, sporting the least amount of filler, some great tracks, and the fights with the masters are unique and showcase various fighting styles and personalities. Masaru doesn't level up, but his strong base stats allow him to keep up with his opponents, so it doesn't really matter yet. And hey, who doesn't love a little trash talk now and then?
Hunga donga, runga funga, ukam bukam deka bunka donka, hunga gumba bunga.
Welcome to the prehistory chapter, where spoken language doesn't exist, rock music consists of banging bones against a boulder, and fast food means wild animals that are too fast to catch. This is probably the most traditional of the starting 7 chapters, at least in its overall flow, but most definitely not in its narrative. The story is rather simplistic, but that's to be expected when there's no spoken dialogue. It's conveyed in stereotypical grunts, thought bubble images, and don't underestimate the usefulness of body language! I am now realizing that this is the 3rd Disney reference I've made in this video. I need help. Anyways,
This Pogo caveman. Pogo live in tribe with gorilla friend Gory. Pogo and Gory learning to hunt. Pogo have good sense of smell. Pogo later meet girl named Beru. Beru hiding from enemy tribe. Pogo fall in love. Enemy tribe raid Pogo tribe. Saki lead enemies. Saki big jerk. Enemy tribe cause big trouble. Elder big mad. Pogo kicked out. Pogo forced to wander wilderness. Beru get captured by enemy tribe again. Pogo and Gory raid enemy tribe to save Beru from being sacrificed to a giant T-Rex named Odo. Wow, the situation got so intense I had to break character. But yeah, for a story without spoken dialogue, it's handled surprisingly well. The characters are as expressive as you can get for sprites of that size, and some of the moments that take place are downright hilarious. As for the gimmicks of this chapter, I'd say they were honestly improved by the remake. Pogo's special ability is his sense of smell. When you pick up the scent of something, it'll show up as a cloud on the screen. Think of it as a primitive version of seeing enemies on the map, and sometimes you can even find items, which is cool. Though I must say, this is again made so much better in the remake. Why? 2 words. Minimap. I imagine it would have been a lot more cumbersome than the Super Famicom original. There are also crafters you can go to combine 2 items into better ones. Kind of like in the Near Future chapter, except more reliable, and you can get some of the best items in the chapter this way. There's also some pretty awesome loot to find in this level. 3 items in particular are worth the effort. One is a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, while the other 2 are from the optional boss, one of which is pretty broken. I do have one knock against this chapter though. While most of the music is great, I will say that the battle music took a little bit of a hit in the remake when compared to the original. It just doesn't feel quite right to me. The other elements though, really freaking good. Pogo is a powerhouse when leveled, the tracking gimmick works really well, and the more traditional flow of the chapter makes it a great starting point, not to mention how well it manages to convey its story without spoken words. Guess it's kind of funny that the chapter that didn't have to reinvent the wheel comes from an era where wheels had barely been invented in the first place.
You got a timeout coming, buddy. Come on, let's go. You're coming with me. Let's go.
The Distant Future chapter feels like both a parallel and a foil to the Prehistory chapter. Both feature protagonists who don't talk, but while the Prehistory chapter manages to convey its story effectively without the use of dialogue, this chapter excels for the exact opposite reason. It is by far the most story-heavy and dialogue-heavy chapter in the whole game. However, the dialogue is handled in such a spectacular way that it more than makes up for the fact that there's only one mandatory battle in the whole chapter. There's so much heart and soul in this narrative that it comes off as ironic that your playable character is a robot which technically has neither. You play as Cube, an autonomous support robot unit created by Kato, an engineer aboard a spaceship known as the Cogito Ergo Sum. The ship is on its way back to Earth transporting some very dangerous cargo, a xenoform known only as the Behemoth. You're introduced to the crew early on. There's Kirk, the helmsman who's a big fan of gaming. Next is Rachel, the signaler, who's in love with Kirk. Then there's Huey, the chief mate and head of cargo, who used to be romantically involved with Rachel before they broke up. Then there's Bishop, the ship's captain, who only communicates with you via monitor. Finally, there's a special person on board, that being Corporal Darth, who...
Do you intend to let your clank have the run of the ship?
Oh, wonderful. He sounds racist. You're also introduced to the ship's main computer, Decimus. Well, this looks like a well-made crew. I have no doubt that they'll accomplish their... Oh wait, this is basically an homage to sci-fi movies like Alien and 2001: A Space Odyssey, which means something is bound to go horribly wrong. And sure enough, it starts with Kirk's spacesuit malfunctioning while they're trying to repair a broken antenna, and it all goes downhill from there. People start dying, fingers get pointed, the others continue to act suspicious, tensions flare, oh, and there's the slight matter that the Behemoth escaped and is on the loose! As the rest of the crew drops one by one, Cube eventually discovers that there's an imposter among us who tries to kill Kato. As it turns out, the real mastermind is actually the main computer Decimus, or as it refers to itself, OD10. It's been in control of everything. It even takes control of the loading screens. How fitting that the only way to get to it is through the Captain Square arcade game, which was the only other place where optional battles would happen. Incidentally, the fight with OD10 is the only necessary fight in the whole chapter, and it's my only major complaint about the chapter, seeing that you can cheese it with Maser Cannon in 2 or 3 turns. But this chapter does so much right that I can forgive a lackluster chapter boss. The ambiance of the ship and its isolation in space is brilliantly shown in its sound design, using only 1 track of music and relying on environmental sounds for the rest of it, including the sound of the arcade machine in the rec room. But again, the presentation of the narrative really sells this chapter. The crewmates are characterized really well. Even Darth, whose hatred of robots actually stems from PTSD. There's also the sense of dread that continues to build with each new development. The tension and paranoia among the crewmates, the fear of the roaming behemoth. It's an emotional thrill ride that deserves all the credit it gets. Also, Cube is adorable and wholesome, and I would buy 10 plushies of this little marble. A word of caution to my viewers here. The final acts shall soon be all revealed. To those who wish to see them with fresh eyes, I offer you one final chance to leave. For those who yet remain, let us proceed. All it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. That's how far the world is from where I am. Just one bad day. For those who first played this game blind without any prior knowledge, Live Alive may have at first seemed like an anthology of seemingly unrelated tales. But as they played through the initial 7 chapters, no doubt a connection started to emerge. The ominous music that plays as the antagonist reveals themselves in several of the stories, the pattern in the names of the villains. And then, upon completing all 7 chapters, another story appears to you. And it's here where the pieces begin to come together. The era, the Middle Ages. The place, the Kingdom of Lucrece. Our protagonist, the bold knight Ørsted. We open up in the midst of a grand tournament, to the victor of which the king offers the hand of his daughter, the Princess Alethea. Ørsted's final opponent is his friend and rival, the mage Strabo. After a fierce battle, Ørsted emerges triumphant, winning the tournament and the right to marry Alethea. His joy is short-lived, however, as his bride-to-be is whisked away by the Lord of Dark, who menaced the kingdom years ago. Overcome with distress, the king sends Ørsted to face the fiend. Strabo decided to join him, and together they seek out the hero Hash, who fought the Lord of Dark years ago, by way of his companion, the sage Uranus. To be perfectly honest at first glance, this seems like the most traditional chapter of the bunch, checking off all the boxes. The silent hero, the loyal companion, the reborn demon king, the damsel in distress, the legendary veteran, the sacred sword, random encounters, grinding. Yeah, this starts like your typical fantasy RPG. and if it remained on this track, there's no way I'd put it this high. Granted, the environments look really good, and the music definitely manages to fit the mood, especially Heroic Struggle, Epic of the Archon, and Unbroken Wings. It's also a neat touch how the characters talk in iambic pentameter, like something straight out of Shakespeare. But based on the first half of the chapter, I'd probably put it somewhere in the middle. No, what catapults this chapter to the number 2 spot is the twist that builds up when you proceed through Archon's Roost and find the statues. You've seen them before, but why are the images of the bosses you've faced before gathered here? Then, just when you think you've defeated the Lord of Dark, Hash realizes that it's a fake, only to succumb to his illness, while Strabo investigates the statue, only to seemingly be caught in a cave-in, forcing Ursted and Uranus to flee. That night, Ursted is awakened by a sudden noise and finds the Lord of Dark in the throne room. Enraged, Ursted strikes at the fiend. Except he finds out all too late that it's an illusion, and lying dead at his feet is his own king. Now disgraced and labeled a demon, Ursted flees for his life, but when he realizes there's nowhere for him to run, he surrenders himself and awaits his fate. But Uranus reminds him that as long as even one person believes in him, he mustn't lose hope. Now driven by love, Ursted escapes and storms Archon's Roost once again and discovers Strabo? That's right, Ursted's former friend faked his own death and set up this whole plan out of love-born jealousy to ruin Ursted and claim the princess for himself. Enraged, Ursted strikes down his betrayer, only for Alethea to appear and berate Ursted for taking so long, claiming that Strabo came to save her and...
Oh. Fuck.
The one person Ursted held out hope for just abandoned him. And now, Ursted's first words lament that he has lost everything. His king, the faith of his people, his home, his friends, his beloved, and finally, his heart and soul. Utterly lost in despair and hatred, he casts aside his humanity, taking up the mantle of the Lord of Dark, Odio. At last, everything becomes clear. Every chapter boss you've faced so far is nothing more than an incarnation of the Demon King. All this time you've been dealing with his hatred. In fact, in the final chapter, you can pick Ursted and play a what-if scenario where you play as those same bosses and either teach the do-gooders a lesson or just pick the Armageddon ending and erase all history in the ultimate rage quit. And yet, in the end, not even absolute victory would satisfy Ursted's blackened heart. All he feels is emptiness, knowing all of this desolation was caused by his own hand. Ursted's fall from grace is nothing less than a Shakespearean tragedy, and I can't even bring myself to hate the guy. If one bad day can turn a man into a monster, then Ursted had the worst day imaginable. You've finished 8 stories across all of history and beyond. You've witnessed Ursted's descent into darkness, resulting in his awakening as the Lord of Dark, Odio. You've faced down 7 incarnations of the Demon King's wrath and emerged victorious. But now that he has seen your work across time and space, he's decided that tormenting heroes from throughout history was not enough. He wants to deal with you all personally. So be it. Avengers! Assemble. The Dominion of Hate is the game's final chapter, and the moment that brings everything together for a glorious finale. Unlike the other chapters, which have their own protagonists, you instead choose one of the previous heroes with which to begin. From there, Odio brings you to his own domain in the Middle Ages. Only now, everything is different. The map is now stained with blood, and the areas have been given new, ominous names. What was once a land brimming with life and vibrance is now overrun by monsters from across the game's previous chapters. And you find yourself alone, with only the items and experience you retained from your previous chapters. From here, you have but one mission: find Odio and take him down. Now you could just find the Holy Sword and storm Archon's Roost by yourself, but 1, you wouldn't get the true ending that way, and 2, you'd probably get your shit rocked if you tried. No, the real point of this chapter is to find the other heroes who are scattered across the map. Some take some effort, including the possibility of fighting them beforehand. and considering their stats carry over as well, some of these fights are challenging, requiring you to optimize your strategy and take full advantage of the game's battle mechanics. Not only that, but each member has a trial to complete, which plays into how their own chapter went. Completing each trial will reward that hero with their ultimate weapon. Pogo's Trial of Instinct requires him to sniff out the correct path forward. Akira's Trial of Heart brings him into contact with the spirits of the poor souls extinguished by Odio's wrath, including a tragic realization by Strabo. Sundown's Trial of Time has him trying to make his way through the gauntlet before the cave darkens and brings him into contact with one of the chapter's 5 super bosses. The Earthen Heart Master's Trial of Skill requires you to use the proper skill to destroy each boulder. Oboromaru's Trial of Keys is a labyrinth underneath the abandoned castle town. Masaru's Trial of Power is a treasure trove guarded by a powerful serpent. And Cube's Trial of Mind is a maze of puzzles that test your wits. The point of all this, the trials, facing the super bosses to find the cosmic armor pieces, and the fact that hordes of enemies scale to your current party's average level, all serve one purpose: to make you strong enough to face Odio at the top of Archon's Roost. You start by facing Odio's, face. The eyes can stun you with electricity and attack from afar, the mouth can cripple you with status effects and AoE, and the brow can counter all non-fixed damage dealt to it by healing the whole face. Eventually, after defeating the eyes and mouth, the brow unfurls into Purity of Odio, the toughest boss in the game. It has massive health, a high dodge rate so that your attacks are more likely to miss than usual, and devastating attacks, including the terrifying Saint Alethea, born of Ersted's own misery. However, with the right buffs and debuffs, you can emerge victorious. And now, you have a choice. You can finish off the defeated Ersted, but that would result in the heroes being trapped forever. To truly save him, you have to spare him. But as you turn to leave, Odio takes over again, forcing the heroes to relive their previous battles against all of his incarnations. But with the knowledge they've gained, our heroes emerge triumphant. In the original, this is where it ends. The remake, however, gives us something greater. Ersted's hatred intensifies one last time, forming the true final boss, Sin of Odio. While it is easier than Purity of Odio, it is a far more conclusive battle. When you think you're making progress, Odio disables your main party, only for the remaining heroes to jump in and fight. Eventually, everyone is unbound and hits the Demon King with everything they've got. But even that isn't enough, as Odio traps everyone one last time. But at that moment, everyone's efforts reach Ersted's heart, and he breaks free from Odio, leaving him to finish off the demon that he himself created. And only in the end does he realize the weight of his sins. After getting a talking to from your hero, the fallen knight breathes his last with a heartfelt warning. As long as hatred exists in the world, anyone can become the Demon King. And thus, everyone returns to their own eras. Wow. Already this was a climactic chapter with the intense battles, the grand music, and the feeling of bringing everything together. But what the remake added puts it over the top, with newfound finality in the added final phase, punctuated by a whole new final boss theme, Gigalomania. In the original, Ersted dies never knowing retribution for those who wronged him. But with the final additions to the remake, he achieves something far greater: redemption. This was a perfect conclusion to a remarkable classic that was more than worth the wait in localizing it. And it just makes it more clear how special the new HD 2D style is. Not only does it allow for unique experiences like Octopath Traveler, but the Live Alive remake and the upcoming Dragon Quest III remake open the door for more lost classics to get a new chance. You listening, Squeenix? Ditch the NFTs and give us more HD 2Ds, please. I'm the Quarter Guy, and until next time, the arcade is closed. Are you ready, true believers? Prepare for the most exciting crossover the world has ever seen! Experience incredible action as the world's mightiest heroes team up with the world's strongest fighters! Witness spectacular battles and sensational thrills that will keep you on the edge of your seat! The ultimate tag team battle is about to begin! Brace yourself for the adventure! Next time, QG at the Arcade, Marvel vs. Capcom! It's game time! Hey everyone, QG here. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Feel free to check out my Twitter and my Twitch streams, and consider supporting me through Patreon and donating to my Extra Life campaign to support Children's Wisconsin. Thanks for watching.